Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandro Ferdinando.
And I'm Jitendra Gulasena. Let's start off with a look at the headlines.
Sri Lanka Freedom Party reveals local government elections will be held by April or May. Sri Lanka Freedom Party says that they will not let a super minister be appointed. Prime Minister's secretary instructed the Finance Secretary to provide vehicles for 58 parliamentarians amidst the objection of Secretary of the Ministry of Parliamentary Reforms. Activities of the Mirigama Highway halted due to a protest. The Sirasa Christmas zone declared open.
Welcome back to the news. The local government elections will be held in 4 months. This was revealed during a meeting of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party's district and electoral organisers.
The meeting, which was held at the Sri Lanka Foundation Institute in Colombo under the auspices of President Maithripala Sirisena, lasted for nearly 2 hours.
We expect the election to be held during the first few months of next year.
What about the flower bud?
We will come forward as the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. The President clearly stated that in order for the SLFP to achieve victory, everyone should come together. He also extended an invitation. If they want some party to clinch victory, they can form a separate party and contest under different symbol. The SLFP members of the joint opposition will not opt in membership of that party.
The Pradesh Sabha elections will be held during the first part of next year. We don't know about the flower bud, but anyone can join our party.
According to what we know, the Elections Commission required a period of 3 to 4 months. Once the election is gazetted, we can go for the election as soon as the Commission is ready. Even today, the President extended an invitation for everyone to join the party to strengthen it.
Did Kumara Belgama attend based on this decision?
You need to ask that question from him.
We did. He's a staunch member.
He attends every event concerning the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party will contest the upcoming election under the symbol of the hand and the colour blue.
Are you trying to move forward with the flower bud?
And there are flowers. Why do we need a flower bud?
Has the situation in the SLFP led to the split in the government?
Do not be afraid. There will be no split. Everything that shakes does not fall.
The local government election will definitely be held in April or May. As organisers, we were asked to prepare for the elections.
The President clearly stated that the upcoming local government election would be held during the first quarter of next year. As a party leader, he is exerting all his strength to ensure that the party emerges victorious. We handed over the necessary instructions for the organisers.
The Development Special Provisions Bill is much talked about as a draft bill that attempts to create a post of a super minister. The contents of the draft bill was the center of a focus during the past few days. Now, if the Development Special Provisions Bill is enacted in Parliament, will it undermine the authority of the President?
According to the Development Special Provisions draft bill, superpowers will be vested with the 2 ministers in charge of the portfolios of national policies and economic affairs and development strategies and international trade. Currently, the minister in charge of national policies and economic affairs is Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. The development strategies and international trade is the portfolio of Minister Malik Samaravikrama. There are 2 instances in the bill which involve the President. One is the Rural Modernisation Board. While the President is an ex officio member of the Rural Modernisation Board, this board is tasked with approving plans formulated by development agencies for rural modernisation. In addition, the 45th paragraph of the bill says the President can convene annual meetings with ministers, chief ministers and members of Parliament committees to discuss development plans. Legal experts are of the view that this bill further curbs the President's powers.
I think the real man who's in trouble is the President. He is only entitled to officially address the people concerned once a year, annually, and compulsorily once a year. Do you think a discussion once a year, as far as a powerful person who has most power in the country, running as against a super minister, is going to be effective.
Mr. Are you trying to say that the President has not really gone through this bill in question?
I would say that President's views are now being expressed by the Chief Ministers. I would tend to think that the President will soon smell, just like Mr. Vignesaram is studying. I don't know how long he will have to study. He'll have to study long to understand the plight he's in. But certainly the President has understood. He will understand soon.
The President has executive powers. Why not react now?
Tamil, that is not possible, because this is a battle not between the President and the Prime Minister. It's a battle between the executive and the legislature. This is legislation. Now what he can do is the executive can use his authority, his position in the SLFP, and squash this. If surely he's made a puppet on a string, because he can only meet these people once a year, annually. And what can he do meeting them annually? That is totally making the President walk the streets naked.
There were super ministries during the previous regime as well. We didn't know until it destroyed our government. So we will not agree with the concept of a super ministry. We will not allow the creation of a super ministry. We discussed this matter in the cabinet meeting as well. There won't be any super ministers with special powers. We will not allow anyone to curb our powers. We will take a correct decision regarding this matter. There won't be a super minister. We took a decision today at the cabinet meeting. The biggest problem we have is that as a government we do not communicate enough and make the public aware of things we are doing and things we will not do. At the cabinet we decided to come out and make the public aware of what we are going to do. The President will comment on this issue. If it warrants some action, he will take it. If not, he will discuss the matter further and take a decision. Any type of ministry can be created, but it must be in accordance with the Constitution. There is an idea about creating a strategic development ministry. Discussions are still ongoing. We can see what happens after the discussion. It will never be possible to create a post of a super minister. Never should one person be vested with so much power in this country. We are people who oppose the executive presidency, so we will not support a super minister.
Meanwhile, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa expressed these views on the super minister.
Let's see what happens. The provincial councils will handle this well. There was no super minister. You need to ask this from Ranil Wickramasinghe. There is no point in asking me. He is the one who's making this ministry. There was nothing like this during my time. Super President.
The Secretary to the Prime Minister has issued a letter to the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance to make the necessary allocations to provide 58 parliamentarians with vehicles on an operational lease facility in a backdrop where the Secretary to the Ministry of Parliamentary Reforms has pointed out many shortcomings in the process. The letter notes that once the leasing period is completed, the parliamentarians would have the option of purchasing the vehicle at then the market value.
The duty-free permits for vehicles were issued to ministers and parliamentarians of the current parliament. However, a proposal has been forwarded to obtain vehicles for 58 other members of parliament on an operational lease facility. Facilities in this regard have been stalled as the Secretary to the Ministry of Parliamentary Reforms and Mass Media has not signed off on the proposal. The proposal includes a vehicle for a monthly cost of 500,000 with a limit of 3,000 kilometers. Two companies bid for the process. However, a technical evaluation committee and a cabinet-appointed procurement committee rejected these bids. Forwarding his recommendations to the Cabinet of Ministers, the President pointed out that steps should be taken to ensure transparency during this process and to ensure that the process falls in line with the government's procurement practices. The President points out that the monthly lease would amount to around 700,000 rupees when you take into consideration taxes such as VAT, which would translate into an expense of rupees 250 per kilometer. He notes that this would amount to overpricing. Even in such a backdrop, an economic management subcommittee headed by the Prime Minister has forwarded its recommendations to the Cabinet of Ministers, stating that one organisation that placed the bid qualifies for the project. Thereby, the final decision was to acquire 58 vehicles on an operational lease which would last 60 months. However, the Secretary to the Ministry of Parliamentary Reforms and Mass Media, Nimal Bopage, opposed this move, citing that the tenure of the existing Parliament would complete in 45 months, while the operational lease expires in 60 months. He also pointed out that ownership of the vehicles in question reverting to the said company at the conclusion of the operational lease was another major concern. In this backdrop, the Secretary to the Prime Minister issued a letter to the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, citing another proposal. The letter reads that the parliamentarians would be able to purchase the vehicles once the operational lease concludes at the then market price. The letter further reads that this decision was reached by the Subcommittee on Economic Management and advises the Secretary to the Ministry to proceed accordingly. The bid that was selected was one submitted by Value Trading together with Toyosumi Power Marketing. However, the total sum that will be payments that will be made for the procurement of the said 58 vehicles will amount to over 2.43 billion rupees. I have clearly stated my stance on the vehicle issue. I will not sign this document. My stance remains unchanged.
ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් මම ප්‍රකාශ කරා. බෑ එතුමාගේ වචන දෙක මම කිව්වා. වචන දෙක මම කිව්වා. sign or resign. කෙනෙක් ගනුදෙනුව වෙනවා. දැන් ගනුදෙනුව වෙන්න අසං කරනවා. ඔය ඔබතුමා නැත්නම් වෙන මොකද මුදල් අමාත්‍ය අංශයේ ලේකම්වරයා මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ එක ලේකම්වරයෙක් ප්‍රතික්ෂේප කරන කාර්යය තව ලේකම්වරයෙක් අසං කරාවි කියලා.
Now moving on to more local news, farmers charged that the interest shown to secure luxury vehicles for parliamentarians is not seen in solving the fertilizer subsidy issue. Owing to weak rainfall experienced during the southwestern monsoon, the harvest during the Maha season has dropped by half of the expected output. While these farmers endure such hardships in farming their lands, problems in receiving the fertilizer subsidy has compelled them to abandon their cultivations.
700,000 rupees per ministry is allocated to obtain vehicles. Another 100,000 rupees is given for the expenses. However, they pay no heed to the hardships the farmers go through. Ministers are in the comfort of air-conditioned rooms. They are benefited through the tax monies of the innocent farmers.
If there is money to obtain vehicles for ministers, why can't they provide us with the fertilizer subsidy?
All funds necessary for ministers are transferred. However, we are left with broken promises. We are not asking for vehicles or anything big. All we want is the fertilizer subsidy.
While farmers lament that they cannot harvest their cultivations, there is a significant increase in the price of rice sold in the market. As a solution to this situation, the chairman of the Paddy Marketing Board, MB Disanayaka, says that paddy will be released both today and tomorrow. Thereby, steps were taken to release paddy in the Ampara, Polonnaruwa and Hambantota districts this morning. However, the Paddy Marketing Board says that priority will be given to mill owners in the relevant districts when issuing the stocks of paddy.
The Colombo Stock Exchange said it will cancel the 1.3 billion rupee deal involving the trading of 13.2 million shares of Ceylon Bank by state-owned Bank of Ceylon following a request by the stockbroker who executed the transaction.
In a statement, Rajiva Bandaranaike, the Chief Executive Officer of the Colombo Stock Exchange, said, quote, the CSE has received a request from the stockbroker who executed the transaction involving 13,198,305 shares of Ceylon Bank last Friday to cancel the transaction. According to the stock exchange, such cancellations are permitted under the automated trading rules of the CSE, provided both parties to the transaction mutually agree to cancel the transaction with the approval of the CSE. Bandaranaike was quoted as saying in the statement, having received this request, the CSE will cancel the trade today. The Monetary Board of the Central Bank brought Ceylon Bank, a private bank that was bailed out, under the control of state-owned Bank of Ceylon in December 2008. Bank of Ceylon is one of the 20 largest ordinary voting shareholders of Ceylon Bank. According to media reports, Ceylon shares were sold to a foreign investor at 100 rupees, 15 rupees above market price last week. Media reports said Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe had ordered the sale to be cancelled, citing sale of state assets without approval and the Financial Crimes Investigation Division to probe the deal. Ranil Wickremesinghe conducted himself with regard to the bond issue entirely with the motive of protecting Arjuna Mahendran. He wanted to protect him because Arjuna is his friend. The Prime Minister must make a statement to the country on the suspicion which has arisen on the stock market if he did stop the transaction at the stock market. He must explain as to why he stopped the transaction as the head of the government and the people of this country. Usually a transaction that takes place through the stock market is not cancelled for political reasons. There is a particular program at the Securities and Exchange Commission to regulate this.
The Sirasa Christmas Zone, which is on for the second consecutive year, was declared open this evening and will be held until the 23rd of this month.
The speciality of this year's Christmas Zone is the exposition of a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, blessed by His Holiness Pope Francis. The parade carrying the statue proceeded towards the MTV Embassy head office located in Braybrook Street from the Harrison Square down Dali Road. The Sirasa Christmas Zone was declared open this evening by His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith. Minister of Christian Affairs John Amruthunga was also present at the opening.
I believe that the Capital Maharaja organization has shared and gifted happiness to these children through this Christmas Zone. Last time when I came here, I met around 40 children who were diagnosed with cancer and who had visited this place with their families. At that time, I thought to myself, what am I doing at church? How can we share some happiness with these families? I bought a land in close proximity to the Maharagama Cancer Hospital and I am building a house there so that those who come to obtain medicine from the hospital could find accommodation there. I found the inspiration for this project when I visited this Christmas Zone last year. I thank the board of directors of this organization for this project.
අධ්‍යක්ෂක මණ්ඩලයේ සියලු දෙනාටම මගේ විශේෂ ගෞරවය සහ ස්තුතිය පුද කරමින් සිරස මාධ්‍ය හැම අවස්ථාවෙදීම
The Sirasa network has been identified as a network that always comes forward to create awareness and enlighten the public at all times. On behalf of the President, the Prime Minister, the Government and the Minister of Christian Affairs, I thank you all for this project.
ක්‍රිස්තියානි කටයුතු අමාත්‍යාංශය වෙනුවෙන් මේ අවස්ථාවේ නැවත වරක් අපේ ප්‍රණාමයේ ස්තුතිය මේ ආයතනයට පිරිනමමින් මම නිහඬව ස්තුතියි.
We have been a part of Sri Lankan lives over many years, and our idea in holding this Natal Kalapaya is to propagate unity and understanding among all faiths, similar to what we have done with the Sirasa Vesak Kalapaya. We as a group and as Sri Lanka's leading media and national broadcaster have touched lives over the years, and it is the best time for Sri Lankans to unite and form an inclusive Sri Lanka for all citizens of Sri Lanka.
Let's now cross over to the Sirasa Christmas Zone where we're joined by Newsfirst Krishan Devasagaya. Krishan?
Well, yes, the MTV Embassy Christmas Zone has definitely come alive. Now, the Christmas Zone was officially declared open earlier this evening by His Eminence Cardinal Malcolm Ranjith. Now, Christmas is definitely Hindi air in Colombo 2, Dawson Street, where the MTV Embassy Christmas Zone is taking place. There is lights, there is sound, there is music to fill the hearts and minds of everyone in the family. Come down here to the MTV Embassy Christmas Zone that will be taking place until the 23rd of December and will feature Triforce's bands performing for the entertainment of everyone until the 23rd, starting from tomorrow. So make sure you do not miss out on the MTV Embassy Christmas Zone, which is happening for a second consecutive year, and definitely join in the Christmas spirit by making your way down here.
would Christmas be like without Christmas carols? The word carol actually means dance or a song of praise and joy. And what joy do these beloved carols bring to millions of Christians across the globe? Here are the stories behind two old favorites.
The stars are brightly shining.
The words and lyrics of the old carol, O Holy Night, were written by Placide Cappeau in 1847. Cappeau was a wine seller by trade, but was asked by his parish priest to write a poem for Christmas. He obliged and wrote the beautiful words of the hymn, O Holy Night. He then realized that it should have music to accompany the words, and he approached his friend, Adolphe Charles Adams, who agreed. O Holy Night was translated into English by John Sullivan Dwight. Another favorite Christmas carol, O Come, Emmanuel, was originally written in Latin text in the 12th century. The author of the words and composer to the music of O Come, Emmanuel is yet unknown. It is, however, believed that the melody was of French origin and added to the text 100 years later. The Latin was translated into English by John Mason Neale in the year 1851.
Welcome back. Now on to some headline-making news in the local news front. Amid protests, authorities were forced to postpone the construction of the Meerigama section of the Colombo-Kandy highway.
Residents of Ganegoda, Pallevala and Ambalanwatta gathered at Meerigama to block work on the proposed Colombo-Kandy highway and accuse authorities of not paying compensation for land acquired for the highway. It was Minister of Higher Education and Highways Lakshman Kiryala who was expected at the inaugural ceremony, but he did not turn up. This is sabotage. We stopped work for today, but we will commence construction work on a future date.
Former chairman of the Associated Newspapers of Ceylon Limited, attorney-at-law Sunil K. Rodrigo passed away recently. The final rites were observed today according to the relatives of the late Sunil K. Rodrigo. Attorney-at-law Sunil Rodrigo was one of the most influential chairpersons of ANCL or Lake House and rendered a yeoman's service to the field of print media in the country.
Internationally renowned poet Anne Ranasinghe passed away last Saturday at her residence in Rossmead Place. The funeral of late Mrs. Anne Ranasinghe will take place tomorrow at the Borella General Cemetery at 5 p.m. Here's a brief look back at her illustrious career. Anne Ranasinghe, born on the 2nd of October 1925 as Anneliese Katz in Essen, Germany, is an internationally renowned poet from Sri Lanka. Her first collection of poems, And a Sun That Sucks the Earth to Dry, was published in 1971. Although primarily a poet, she has also published short stories, essays and translations. Her works have been broadcast on radio, published in 17 countries and translated into 9 languages. Drawing from her own life experiences, her writing is described as vibrantly sensuous, or stark and deeply moving. Anne Ranasinghe has won numerous local and international awards for her writing, including the Sri Lanka Arts Council Prize for Poetry in 1985 and 1992, and non-fiction in 1987. In 1994, she won the Sri Lanka Literary Award for Best Collection of Short Stories.
And with that, we wrap up Primetime News. For the News First team, I'm Sandro Ferdinando.
And I'm Juthendra Gunasena. Good night and take care.